It happened on an overcast afternoon outside a country club in Los Angeles. A homeless man approached Tiger Woods as he exited the building, his head low, his voice barely audible. "Sir, can you give me $1?" For most passersby, it would have been a forgettable moment, but Tiger Woods didn't just pause, he stopped completely. What followed next shocked not just the man, but everyone who would later hear this story. Tiger was in town for a private charity golf event, one of many on his calendar, but he hadn't expected a random stranger in tattered clothes to approach him so openly, especially on private property. The man looked exhausted, eyes sunken, hands trembling. $1. That's all he asked. No story, no pitch, no performance, just a simple request from someone who looked like life had forgotten him. Most celebrities would have nodded politely, maybe handed over a bill and continued walking. But Tiger didn't move. He studied the man for a second longer than most people are comfortable with. Not with judgment, but with recognition. Something about him pulled at something deeper. And in that moment, Tiger's response would go far beyond what anyone expected. His name was Samuel Sam Carter, a 58-year-old veteran who had once worked as a groundskeeper at a local golf course, not far from where Tiger had played as a teen. Sam had lost everything. A series of medical bills, a layoff, and eventually the apartment he shared with his younger brother. Now he lived under an overpass near Venice Boulevard, surviving on scraps and memory. Sam hadn't recognized Tiger at first. He wasn't into sports anymore. Life had stripped away such luxuries. But as Tiger approached with his quiet presence and bodyguards in tow, something about the aura felt familiar. It was only when one of the guards addressed him by name that Sam's eyes widened. "Wait, you're Tiger Woods?" he whispered. Embarrassed, Sam had lowered his gaze. I wasn't trying to be rude. I just needed $1 for coffee." But Tiger didn't look insulted. Instead, he crouched slightly to get on eye level. "What's your name?" he asked. That one question, asked with sincerity, shattered the wall Sam had built around himself for years. Tiger didn't reach for his wallet immediately. He asked Sam to walk with him, just a few steps, to get out of the way of the gathering press nearby. The cameras hadn't noticed yet, but Tiger's team knew they would soon. Still, Tiger ignored the flashes and focused only on Sam. "Tell me your story," Tiger said. At first, Sam hesitated, but then slowly the words came out. The job he'd lost, the brother he couldn't support, the injury that made labor work impossible. As he spoke, Tiger listened. Really listened. Not with pity, but with genuine attention. The kind Sam hadn't received in years. Then Tiger did something unexpected. He reached into his pocket, not for $1, but for his personal assistant's card. "I want you to call this number tonight," he said. "We're going to figure something out. But for now..." And then finally Tiger handed him not $1, but a crisp $100 bill. "Let's start here." As Sam walked away, stunned and gripping the money like it might vanish, a crowd began to form. Someone had started recording the interaction. A small group of fans asked Tiger for a photo, unaware of what had just happened, but his expression had changed. There was a weight behind his eyes now, something more reflective than his usual tournament focus. Tiger sat in the back of his SUV, watching Sam shuffle toward the bus stop with his shoulders slightly straighter than before. "Do we know anything about that guy?" he asked his assistant. "No, sir," she replied him, "but I can find out." Tiger nodded. "Please do." That night, Tiger canceled his dinner plans. Instead, he went back to his hotel, opened his laptop, and spent over an hour researching homeless services in Los Angeles. For years, he had supported youth programs, but this moment had cracked open a new door, one he hadn't planned to walk through until now. The next morning, Tiger's team tracked Sam down. It wasn't easy. Shelters were overcrowded, records incomplete, but eventually they found him in a makeshift camp under a freeway. Tiger didn't go himself, not yet, but he sent his people with food, clothes, and a message. He meant what he said. Sam had spent the night thinking he'd imagined it, that maybe he'd dreamed the entire conversation. But when Tiger's assistant approached with a smile and a gift bag, Sam's knees nearly buckled. Inside was a hotel keycard, a prepaid phone, clean socks, and a handwritten note. "Take this time to rest. We'll talk soon, shit. TW." It was the first night in years that Sam slept in a bed. The sheets were stiff with starch, the AC too cold, and the quiet unsettling. But it was real. As he lay there staring at the ceiling, he realized he wasn't just off the street. He was off the list of forgotten souls the world walks past. 3 days later, Sam stood nervously outside a modest office near Santa Monica. Inside, Tiger waited. No cameras, no press. Just 2 men and a pot of fresh coffee between them. "How'd you sleep?" Tiger asked. Sam chuckled. "Felt like royalty. Even called the front desk just to say hi. Tiger smiled, then turned serious. I looked into your background. You worked at Fairway Hills Golf Club? Sam nodded. For 11 years. Loved that place. Tiger leaned back. They need someone to help with their junior training program. I made a call. You start Monday, if you're up for it. Sam's breath caught in his chest. You serious? Tiger nodded. Completely. Sam blinked back tears. For the first time in years, he wasn't being offered pity or pocket change. He was being offered purpose. Sam started work that Monday. He arrived early, in the same shoes he'd worn on the street, but with a new shirt and a restored sense of pride. The kids loved him, especially when he showed them how to grip a club like the pros. You used to be a groundskeeper? One boy asked. I've been a lot of things, Sam replied with a grin. Tiger visited that Friday, unannounced. He stood at the edge of the practice green, watching Sam teach a girl how to line up her shot. She missed twice, but Sam just smiled. One more swing, he said gently. You never know which one will change everything. Later, Tiger approached Sam. You belong here, he said. Not because I helped, but because you got back up. Sam looked at him, eyes shining. Sometimes, sir, he said, you just need someone to see you, even if it's just for $1. Months later, a local reporter wrote an article titled The Swing That Saved a Life. It told the story of Sam Carter, a man who asked Tiger Woods for $1 and got far more in return. But if you ask Tiger, he'll say he got something too. I didn't just help him, Tiger once said in a quiet interview. He reminded me what this game, what life, is really about. Seeing people and showing up when it counts. Since then, Tiger's foundation has expanded to support homeless veterans with training, mentorship, and housing support. As for Sam, he's back on his feet, mentoring kids, and finally able to speak about his past without shame. All because of a question that had nothing to do with money, and a man who stopped to listen. 2 months later, Sam stood on the practice green, the sun warm on his back, as a line of kids waited for their turn. His laugh came easier now, and his eyes no longer carried the heaviness they once did. Most of them didn't know where he'd been just weeks before. To them, he was Coach Sam, the man who gave high fives, told corny golf jokes, and never let them give up after a bad swing. But word had spread. Parents whispered, reporters called, and the story of the man who asked Tiger Woods for $1 had gone viral. Sam's past wasn't a secret anymore. It was part of the story. And instead of shame, he wore it like a badge. Proof that rock bottom doesn't have to be the end, if someone reaches out a hand. Tiger visited again, this time with his daughter. She ran up to Sam and asked, "Can you show me that thing where the ball curves left?" Sam smiled. "Ah, a draw shot. Got big dreams, huh?" She nodded proudly. "Just like my dad." And in that moment, Sam realized something profound. He wasn't just helping kids learn golf. He was helping them believe in themselves. It was early evening when Tiger and Sam sat on a bench overlooking the course, watching the sun dip below the trees. "You know," Sam said, voice low, "I almost didn't ask. That day, I almost let you walk past." Tiger nodded. "But you didn't. And I'm glad you didn't." Sam reached into his pocket and pulled out a single, crumpled dollar bill kept in a small plastic sleeve. "I carry this to remind me," he said, "that the smallest question can change everything, that you saw me when I felt invisible." Tiger looked at the bill, then at Sam. "Funny thing is, I think you reminded me to look up, to stop and see people again." Later, as Tiger walked back to his car, a kid ran up to Sam and asked, "Coach, were you really homeless once?" Sam bent down, looked the boy in the eye and said, "Yeah, I was, but that's not who I am now. And if I can get back up, so can anyone." And as night fell over the course, with the lights of the city blinking on in the distance, one thing became clear. That one small moment, that $1, had started a chain reaction neither of them ever saw coming. And for both Tiger Woods and Samuel Carter, that encounter wasn't the end of a story. It was the beginning of something far greater. Weeks after the story made national headlines, letters began pouring in, not to Tiger but to Sam. Handwritten notes, emails, and even care packages from people across the country. Veterans, single parents, young athletes, all sharing how his story had touched something in them. "You gave me hope again," one woman wrote. "I was ready to give up, until I saw what $1 could do." Sam read each letter slowly, often with trembling hands. He kept them in a shoebox under his bed, along with that same crumpled dollar bill. The box was getting full now, and so was his heart. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a forgotten man. He felt seen, not just by Tiger, but by strangers who saw their own struggle in his. Tiger's Foundation took notice too. Inspired by Sam's story, they launched a new initiative, Project Restart, aimed at helping homeless veterans transition back into work through mentorship, housing, and job placement in sports and youth programs. Sam was asked to be its first ambassador. "Me?" he asked, stunned. "You sure you want a guy who used to sleep under a bridge?" The answer came with a smile. Exactly because of that. 1 year later, Sam stood on stage at a charity gala, dressed in a tailored suit donated by a former student's father. His hands gripped the podium, knuckles pale, but his voice was steady. "All I asked for was $1, he said, eyes scanning the room. "But what I got was my life back." The crowd rose in a standing ovation. Not for his past, but for his present, for his journey, for his strength. Tiger watched from the side of the stage, arms crossed, a quiet pride in his expression. This wasn't about publicity. It never had been. It was about seeing someone no one else saw and choosing to act. That single moment had spiraled into something far greater than either of them expected. A ripple that had turned into a wave. After the event, a young boy approached Sam, gripping his mother's hand. "Are you the dollar man?" he asked shyly. Sam chuckled, bent down, and handed him a brand new $1 bill, crisp and clean. "Now it's your turn," he said. "Go make it matter." And with that, the story came full circle. A story that began with a simple question and ended with a legacy of kindness that keeps growing. 6 months later, on a quiet Wednesday morning, Sam found himself back where it had all started. The old footbridge near the laundromat, now freshly painted, the rusted rails replaced with smooth wood. A plaque had been mounted at the center, small and easy to miss, unless you were really looking. Sometimes, all it takes is $1, and someone who cares. Sam sat on the bench nearby, sipping coffee from a paper cup, watching the city breathe around him. People passed by, joggers, mothers with strollers, office workers on Bluetooth calls, all moving, all carrying their own invisible stories. Tiger joined him a few minutes later, 2 coffees in hand. No words at first, just the familiar silence of 2 people who had been through something together and no longer needed to fill the gaps. "You still carry one in your wallet?" Tiger asked, gesturing to the folded dollar Sam kept tucked behind his ID. "Every day," Sam nodded. "Not because I need it, just to remember what it started." They sat like that for a while, watching the river move under the bridge, steady and sure. Behind them, a young woman stopped in front of the plaque, reading it slowly. She turned to her friend and asked, "What's the story behind this?" Sam smiled faintly. "It's starting to tell itself," he said. A local school invited Sam to speak, not because he was famous, but because one of the teachers had heard his story secondhand and felt her students needed to hear about real resilience. Not the polished kind. The messy, honest, hopeful kind. He stood in front of a room of restless teenagers, unsure if they'd listen. But as he began, the fidgeting slowed. When he held up the dollar bill, now creased and worn from his wallet, something shifted in the room. "This isn't just money," he told them. "It's proof that someone believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." Hands went up. Questions came. Not about the past, but about how. How do you come back? How do you forgive yourself? How do you keep going when you don't feel like you matter? He answered them the only way he knew how, with truth and time, and the kind of vulnerability most people are afraid to offer. After the session, a girl stayed behind. She didn't speak at first, just stood there, twisting a dollar bill between her fingers. Finally, she looked up and said, "I think I needed this more than I knew." Sam didn't say much, just nodded and pressed his hand lightly to her shoulder. Outside, the leaves were turning gold, and the air smelled like change. And somewhere deep inside, Sam understood. This wasn't the end of his story. It was the beginning of others. Because kindness doesn't just echo, it rewrites.